On average, a person knows about 5,000 faces. Of those 5,000 faces, approximately 150 are close acquaintances. Statistics indicate that out of 100 people, one of them is mentally unwell. This means that among your acquaintances, there is a high likelihood that there is at least one person who needs a psychiatrist. What is the probability of meeting a psychopath in a new acquaintance? And what if this new acquaintance targets you specifically? His plan was to first tie up Angela, make love to her, and then let everything burn in blue flames. This was not just a figure of speech, because a canister of gasoline was already standing in the bedroom. Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Angela J. was born and raised in California, but then her entire family moved to Australia, as her parents were originally from there. After her parents' divorce, the girl stayed with her mother, Susan, and her sister, Danielle. Angela graduated from high school on the central coast of New South Wales and later completed university there, earning a degree in reproductive medicine. In 2016, Angela lived in Port Macquarie and worked at a hospital as an obstetrics and gynecology intern. The young woman loved her profession, which gave her the privilege of bringing new people into the world. Her patients were also thrilled with their intern doctor. When Angela was just over 20 years old, she married her boyfriend, Ben. Although their relationship was nearly perfect at first, when Ben joined the Navy, their worlds drifted apart. The stressful lives each led with their own challenges separated the young couple. At 27, Angela found herself searching for love again. Due to her demanding work schedule, the young woman had little free time. So, like most people at the time, she turned to a dating app. Several men immediately noticed Angela, but one potential suitor for a closer acquaintance proved to be the most persistent. He liked all of Angela's photos to show how interested he was in her. The young woman was flattered by this gesture, and they began communicating, which almost immediately took on romantic tones. 36-year-old Paul Lambert turned out to be a handsome guy with a charming smile and dimples on his cheeks. They met on the app in August 2016, but a personal meeting and first date were delayed for a long time because Angela lived in Port Macquarie, while Paul lived in Sydney. Finally, they arranged their first date. Paul dropped everything and flew to Port Macquarie, where he had reserved a table at a restaurant in advance. It was a pleasant dinner with live music. At first, Paul and Angela were very shy with each other, and there were awkward pauses in the conversation, but after a couple of drinks, they talked non-stop for several hours. So, it could be said that the first date went splendidly. It turned out that the new acquaintances had something in common. Both had previously been married, divorced, and were now looking for love again. This marked the beginning of a long-distance relationship, accompanied by a whirlwind of grand gestures and numerous gifts. Paul often sent Angela flowers and paid for her travel expenses. The thing was, Angela frequently traveled for work. Her new admirer would find out in advance where she was going, then call the hotel and upgrade the room where his chosen one was staying. He paid out of his own pocket for more comfortable rooms, which greatly flattered Angela. For the first time since her divorce, someone cared for her, tried to please her in every way, and with whom the woman finally felt a romantic connection. Angela had butterflies in her stomach when she thought of Paul. Her new acquaintance met all her criteria. Paul Lambert was kind, attractive, had a good job, and many friends, at least on social media. He was attentive and seemed like a good family man. Paul often spent weekends with his nephew, taking him fishing. After some time, Angela was ready to introduce Paul to her sister, Danielle, her mother, Susan, and Susan's new husband, Bill. When Susan first saw Paul, a tall, handsome, very confident, well-dressed man who greeted her with a stunning bouquet of flowers, she melted. The woman was delighted because her daughter was radiant with happiness. Susan gushed to her husband, Bill, about how wonderful Paul was, how in love he was with Angela, and how lucky her daughter was to meet such a man, but Bill, for some reason, didn't share her enthusiasm. Within 5 minutes of meeting Paul, Bill told his wife that something was off about him. Unfortunately, male intuition didn't fail, and just 6 weeks later, Angela felt the same. The relationship soured as Lambert became increasingly domineering and controlling. If Angela stayed at work a couple of minutes late, Paul would immediately start calling and texting. He constantly asked which male colleagues she spoke with, monitored what time she left work and arrived home, and whether she stopped anywhere along the way. He expressed displeasure if Angela didn't answer the phone or respond to his messages immediately. Overall, Paul's actions and behavior were too intense and overwhelming. The butterflies in the woman's stomach turned to anxiety. Lambert persistently pushed for their relationship to move to the next level. This made Angela feel uncomfortable, as if she were backed into a corner. As soon as she announced the breakup and suggested he find happiness with another woman, the tension she had begun to notice intensified even more. She had already told Paul she didn't want to continue communicating, but her words had the opposite effect. The intensity of his attentions only increased. As soon as Angela broke up with Paul, a completely different side of his personality emerged. Lambert began texting Jay multiple times a day, threatening to kill himself, jump under a train, or a moving truck if she didn't return to him. He stalked her with phone calls, claiming he had stolen the keys to her apartment and that one day she would find his lifeless body in her home. Naturally, Angela felt guilty about the breakup. She worried that she had caused Paul to suffer and that she had given him false hope for a future together. If he, God forbid, took his own life, it would be her fault alone. She desperately wanted to escape him, but didn't know how. In reality, nothing depended on Angela. No matter how the woman behaved with this man, it wouldn't have changed anything in the end. It only worsened the situation because Paul was a manipulator. No one even suspected that Paul Lambert wasn't his real name. In reality, his name was Paul Scales. He had been deported from the USA after stalking his ex-girlfriend and had previously been arrested for assaulting his ex-wife. A psychotherapist diagnosed him with bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder, which made Paul hypersensitive to rejection. Lambert wasn't even supposed to be in that area of New South Wales when he met Angela in 2016 because he had 10 restraining orders against him concerning 5 different women. In Queensland, Lambert was under strict supervision by law enforcement. Everything Paul did with Angela during their relationship was the beginning of his usual pattern of behavior. First, excessive attention, lavish gifts, and heaps of compliments, as if luring the victim into a trap. Then came coercive control. Coercive control is behavior in which one person uses manipulation, intimidation, and various forms of emotional and psychological abuse to gain power and control over another person. So, who was Paul Lambert really? Paul Dennis Lambert, real name Paul Michael Scales, was born on August 10, 1980, in Queensland, Australia. His parents divorced when he was 4 years old. Paul had an older sister who, by then, had married and started her own family. He also had 2 half-brothers and 2 half-sisters because, eventually, Paul's father remarried and had more children. Paul's history of violence toward women began when he was just over 20. At 36, Lambert met Angela. For about 13 years before meeting her, the man had been cruel to his girlfriends. As mentioned, he had 10 restraining orders concerning former partners. Paul exhibited controlling behavior, intimidation, and sometimes physical violence toward his girlfriends whenever they tried to break up with him. Lambert would stage an entire performance, threatening to take his own life. He fabricated elaborate lies, claiming that family members were dying or that he had been diagnosed with cancer. He said he had been abused and mistreated as a child. In short, he did everything to keep his partner by any means. For a while, the women would return, feeling sorry for him. When that stopped working, Paul would contact his ex-girlfriend's family or her new boyfriend and threaten them. Most often, what were once romantic relationships ended with a police report and a restraining order against Paul. In February 2014, Lambert married a woman he had known for several years, and their marriage quickly deteriorated. Former colleagues said Lambert left his wife just a couple of weeks after their wedding, despite consulting with builders and getting quotes for building a house together. The reason was some mysterious woman he told no one about. Later, Paul managed to rekindle the spark with his wife, and they were together for a while. But just 7 months later, in September 2014, he traveled to Orlando, Florida, where he began a romance with 32-year-old television journalist Brittany Ann Keel, an Emmy Award winner, whom he met online. Lambert flew to his beloved several times until he was fired from his job in Brisbane after the business owners grew tired of his petty thefts. Each time he was caught stealing, Paul would act bewildered and say he simply forgot to take the item out of his pocket. The funny thing was, he wasn't poor and had enough money for a decent life. So petty theft at work was nothing more than an obsession or a form of entertainment. For a long time, Paul seemed like an impeccable employee, and only through regular interaction could one see it was just a mask. Colleagues said Lambert always planned everything meticulously. He constantly devised schemes and plans, always thinking 10 steps ahead. He was considered intelligent, but a bit strange. At work, Lambert was a professional and earned good money, but in his personal life, he struggled to connect with people and make real friends. And if he became attached to someone, he believed it was forever. After his marriage fell apart for good, Paul moved to Florida to be near Brittany. Despite her reluctance, Lambert arranged a personal meeting and convinced her to spend 3 months with him to see if they could be together. But his behavior was so erratic and unpredictable that Brittany ended the relationship a month after Lambert's arrival and firmly asked him not to contact her again. But it was too late because the well-known television reporter became his new obsession. When the woman announced the breakup, Paul launched a campaign of manipulation, guilt-tripping, harassment, control, and emotional terror to force Keel to continue their relationship. Paul did what he always did: stalked her, threatened to kill himself, intimidated Brittany's family, and called her employer in the television news department to share information Keel had confided in him privately. He told the journalist he had a head injury and an inoperable brain tumor. According to Brittany, this was an emotional trigger for her because her father had nearly died from a brain tumor. She had told Lambert this during their first meeting, and now he was pressing on her most painful spot. Paul also fabricated stories about deceased relatives, claimed he had 9 personalities, and bombarded Keel with hundreds of emails and messages, attacking her with calls. Then Paul changed tactics and blamed his erratic behavior on a non-existent twin brother, Michael. He spun a detailed story about how he and Michael were simultaneously dating Keel, but she never realized it. Paul maliciously threatened Brittany's reputation, threatening to disgrace her and reveal dirty secrets that could harm her professionally. He also tried to extort money from Keel in exchange for leaving her alone, doing everything to ruin the successful journalist's life. Finally, the woman could no longer endure it and reported his behavior to the police. Keel said that due to Lambert's threats and stalking, she fell ill, couldn't eat or sleep, and was afraid to leave her home. In May 2015, Lambert was arrested and charged with stalking and extortion. In a Florida court, Paul publicly displayed alarming psychopathic behavior for the first time. In June 2015, after spending a month in a migration center, he was deported from the USA, accompanied by 2 federal marshals. It was then that Paul Scales changed his name to Paul Lambert to start anew and distance himself from what happened in Florida. After returning to Australia, he tried to ruin his ex-wife's life, but she also reported his behavior to the police and obtained a protective order. However, Paul repeatedly violated this order. Once, he attacked her in her car, punched her in the face, and tried to strangle her. As a result, Lambert was sentenced to 12 months of probation. In May 2016, Paul moved to the suburb of Kogarah in southern Sydney and got a job as an insurance agent at a motorcycle dealership. However, this violated the terms of his probation, as he was prohibited from leaving Queensland without permission from the parole board. When Paul met Angela J., he initially presented himself as a caring man, but after he began showing his usual pattern of behavior, complaints about non-existent illnesses, incessant calls and messages. Angela felt guilty and decided to smooth things over. She invited him to her school reunion, but made it very clear they would attend the event strictly as friends. The woman hoped Paul would meet someone else and forget about her. However, things didn't go as she planned. The interaction quickly escalated into an argument, and Paul left the event with Angela's phone and keys, which he had taken from her purse. As a result, the woman had to spend the night at her sister Danielle's place. Even after this, Lambert didn't calm down. He began calling and emailing threats to her sister. Then, a message came to Danielle's phone from someone named Dan, who claimed to be Paul's friend. The stranger wrote that he had met Lambert in a depressed state due to his breakup with his beloved, and that he had seen Paul nearly get hit by a truck when he ran into the middle of the road. Luckily, the truck swerved and avoided the distraught man. Messages from Paul's supposed friend alarmed Angela even more. She worried that he might have died because of her. Seeing her sister's state, Danielle convinced Angela to go to the police the next day and tell them everything. At that moment, the women didn't realize that Dan was actually Paul Lambert himself. The next morning, October 30th, 2016, her sister drove Angela to the police station. After checking the database, the officers informed the women that Paul had a history of violence. But in the opinion of the police, he posed a greater threat to himself than to her. However, they asked her to call emergency services immediately if anything happened. Jay filed for a civil protection order against domestic violence, but the police were unable to serve the order to Lambert himself. They tried to contact Paul to hold him accountable, but he evaded appearing in court. Leaving the police station, Angela went to work at the hospital. She even considered telling her colleagues about the situation, but was too ashamed to admit that after 2 months of knowing a man, she had ended up in such a wild story. Jay wanted to warn her management that if she ever didn't show up for work, they should call the police. But she never did. Angela didn't yet know what her former admirer had planned. An old friend of Lambert's recalled that Paul fell in love with his many partners too quickly, so his obsession with Dr. J wasn't surprising. However, no one could have imagined that Lambert would become so fixated on this woman that he would commit a horrific crime. In late October 2016, Paul flew back to Port Macquarie and rented a car, a white Corolla hatchback. He told the manager he had come to meet his girlfriend. They had fought, and he wanted to make amends, not wanting to part on bad terms. The car rental company employee said the man seemed agitated and noticeably nervous as he hurriedly loaded his bags into the trunk. Then Lambert went to a hardware store and bought a utility knife, an axe, and 2 30-meter rolls of duct tape, after which he drove to Angela's house to wait for her to return from work. When the woman saw her ex-boyfriend on her porch, she was frightened. But Paul calmed her down, saying he just wanted to talk. He admitted honestly that 2 personalities were battling within him, and sometimes the bad Paul overpowered the good one. He advised her to call the police immediately if she noticed dangerous changes in him. During this conversation, Paul finally revealed to Angela that Dan, his supposed friend, was a fictitious person. Lambert had tried to get her attention by pretending to be an imaginary friend. He simply didn't know what to do or how to win his girlfriend back. The meeting ended in another argument. Jay told Lambert she regretted meeting him and asked him to leave her alone and never appear in her life again. Paul left, but continued sending threatening messages. He bluntly told her that her house wasn't safe because he had the keys to her front door. He also warned that he was in a good mood for now, but that good mood wouldn't last long, especially after being rejected. Instead of returning home, the man booked a room at a hotel across from the hospital where Angela worked and began stalking her. For several days, he tracked her work schedule, followed where she spent her nights, and often hiding in the bushes, watched through her windows to see what Jay was doing at home. Angela had no idea Paul was nearby, watching her the whole time. Although the woman hoped her obsessive admirer had long returned to Sydney, she planned to change the door locks and hid knives in her bedside table every night because she didn't feel safe in her own home. On November 1st, 2016, Paul went to a gas station and filled a 5-liter canister with gasoline. On November 2nd, he bought a sledgehammer and a crowbar. The man was clearly planning something. On November 3rd, 2016, Angela stopped by her house after work to feed her cat and eat dinner before going to spend the night at her sister's. She was exhausted and wanted to finish her tasks quickly and leave for Danielle's. After putting her dinner in the microwave to heat up, Angela headed to the bedroom to pack clothes for the next day, and she was attacked in the hallway. Jay screamed in surprise, but the assailant was Paul Lambert. The man covered her mouth with his hand, looked intently into her eyes, and said everything was fine, that he just wanted to talk. He led Angela to the bedroom, ordered her to sit on the bed, and began questioning her about other men. Paul admitted he had removed all the kitchen knives from her bedside table and hidden something else there instead. It was duct tape, cable ties, and underwear. Angela realized she was in danger and needed to escape immediately, but her attempt to flee was quickly stopped. Suddenly, a knife appeared in Paul's hand. At first, due to stress, Angela felt nothing. She only saw blood on her clothes and then felt a dull, aching pain in her body. Paul inflicted 11 stab wounds to Angela's chest, arms, and legs before grabbing the gasoline canister and pouring its contents over the woman's head. The liquid ran down her body, getting into her eyes, ears, and mouth. Jay was paralyzed with fear, realizing what would follow. She felt overwhelming terror, knowing they were about to try to burn her alive. But the fuel made the woman's skin slippery, allowing her to break free from Lambert's tight grip. Miraculously, Angela managed to run out of the house. Bleeding heavily and stumbling with every step, she rushed to the nearest neighbor's house for help. Her neighbor Steve had seen an unfamiliar man in Angela's kitchen earlier that day. Now, hearing screams, he grabbed a steel rod and rushed to help. At that moment, Steve saw the wounded Angela. He helped her get to his garage, where Dr. J, staying calm, explained to Steve how to treat her wounds and stop the bleeding, which saved her life until the ambulance arrived. Steve's daughter called the police in the meantime. Then Angela's strength gave out, and she began to lose consciousness. The neighbor panicked, unsure how to explain the nature of her injuries to the paramedics, so he kept asking the injured woman various questions to keep her conscious. When emergency services arrived, Lambert had already fled the scene in the car he had parked behind Angela's house. Paul sped off in the car while dialing numbers on his phone. He managed to make 3 calls. While the woman was receiving first aid on the way to the hospital, her phone rang. Steve, who was riding in the ambulance, answered it. On the other end was Lambert. He quietly asked if she was okay. Then, in a completely unhinged state, Paul called Angela's mother and told her that her daughter had been attacked. His third call was to the police. Lambert spoke with the dispatcher. For some reason, he referred to himself in the third person. Paul told the operator that he first wanted to make love to his girlfriend, then strangle her, pour gasoline on her body, and set her on fire so she wouldn't belong to another man. Clearly, Lambert's entire plan had failed. The police tracked his mobile phone and initiated a high-speed chase north along the Pacific Highway. They had to use special road spikes to stop the criminal's car. This happened about 150 kilometers from Port Macquarie. Paul got out of the car. He was barefoot, wearing shorts and a sweater, and holding a knife. Law enforcement officers tried to subdue him with a taser, but it didn't work. Lambert waved the knife and shouted for them to shoot him. The standoff between the authorities and the criminal lasted several minutes before Paul lunged at one of the officers with the knife. 2 other officers reacted instantly and opened fire with their weapons. Paul was hit by several bullets. First, Lambert's arm seemed to lose its strength. It dropped sharply and hung limp at his side. Then the man dropped the knife to the ground, slowly sank to his knees, and finally fell face first onto the asphalt. As a result of the shooting, 36-year-old Paul Lambert died on the spot. The rented car was searched, and among his belongings, they found a note stating that he wanted to rid the world of a toxic person like himself. Although he tried to do the right thing and be a good person, for some it wasn't enough. Now, let everyone find peace and live happily, because he would eliminate the evil that he was. Apparently, the suicide note was part of his criminal plan. Later, during the search, it was revealed that while waiting for Angela to return from work, Paul had taken a shower in her house and written, "I love Paul," on the steamed-up mirror. He deliberately hid the fire extinguisher in the bedroom closet to put out the flames when it was all over. Most astonishingly, all of this could have been avoided. A few days before the attack, Lambert was stopped by New South Wales police for speeding and driving with an invalid license. But the police didn't know he was violating the terms of his parole, so they only issued a fine. Fortunately, Dr. Angela J. survived the attack by her former boyfriend. She breathed a sigh of relief upon learning that her stalker could no longer harm her. It was immense happiness, almost euphoria, that she had miraculously escaped. For a long time, she felt like the victim of a massacre. It seemed strange to her that she hadn't died because, at one point, the woman had seemingly said goodbye to life. A few days later, the only sign of the horror that had taken place in the quiet suburban house in Port Macquarie was a trail of blood on the driveway leading to the neighbor's house. Angela herself was so traumatized by the incident that she left soon after the attack and returned to the city where she had so many happy memories before meeting Paul Lambert only 6 years later. Despite having to deal with such a horrific situation, where a 6-week relationship ended in stalking, harassment, and an attempt on her life, Angela J. managed to find happiness. Although recovering from the trauma was not easy, it was both physically and emotionally challenging, even though her friends, family, and even former patients rallied around her. Dr. J said that many women were not as lucky as she was and didn't manage to escape. According to statistics, in Australia, about 1 woman a week dies at the hands of a current or former partner. Angela hopes her story will help people see the true meaning of domestic violence. In 2021, Angela married orthopedic surgeon Ben Hardy, whom she met through work. This man became the support and strength every woman dreams of. It was Ben who helped Angela overcome her challenges. Now she has a healthy relationship and strives to channel her energy into supporting other survivors, either through advocacy or as a doctor. Angela J. is grateful to the police and paramedics for their quick response, which saved her life. Her advice to other victims is to trust their intuition and seek help. Don't be ashamed if someone misinterprets your words. After all, if something serious happens, the awareness of those close to you can save your life. Currently, Dr. J is an ambassador for the White Ribbon organization, which addresses domestic violence, and she says she hopes to give a voice to victims. Angela, along with her family, participates in various events aimed at raising funds to support programs to prevent domestic violence in Australia and to support a cancer charity. She survived and can now help save many more lives. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.